listen to this story. AARP, the organization that serves elderly Americans in their retirement age, asked a group of lawyers if they would be willing to lower their per-hour legal assistance fee to a nominal $30 an hour for AARP's senior citizen clients. Elderly members of AARP generally have diminished sources of income and rely on pensions or Social Security for their livelihood, and don't have spare money lying around to hire lawyers of their choice. We all know these lawyers can cost into hundreds and sometimes even thousands of dollars per hour for their services, and they don't guarantee any outcome to the satisfaction of their clients. Still, whenever we get bamboozled by the dizzying questions of law, a lawyer is what we need. Let's go back to the story of AARP. Lo and behold, the lawyers mulled long and hard over AARP's charitable request and came up with their answer. No. Like, no way, Jose. They declined the request of lowering their legal assistance fees to a lowly $30 an hour for AARP's charitable intentions. Fortunately, AARP is also notorious for pestering and not backing down. They upped the ante this time. They sent another survey and asked these very lawyers if they could volunteer their services to their elderly clients this time free of any charge. To the dizzying surprise of the bigwigs of AARP, majority of the lawyers this time answered in affirmative and agreed to volunteer their time free of charge for the same services which they had previously declined to accept. Now, here is another story. A group of loud kids would often gather in an empty lot next to an old man's house and play cricket there. Being the old geezer he was up to his nose with the loud noise and playful pastime, but he couldn't do anything. It wasn't his lot to stop them from playing in it. He came up with an ingenious idea. He called upon them in their playground and offered $5 if they played for him in that place. The kids jumped at the idea of being paid for something they loved doing anyway. The things looked good for the kids until, one day, the old geezer stopped by once again and said, "Sorry, boys, I can't afford $5 a game. I can only pay you $1. The boys grumbled, but agreed to play begrudgingly under an unfair offer from the old geezer. A few more days passed. The old man stopped in once again and said, "Boys, sorry, can't pay you anymore. Want to play for free? Be my guest, or else." The boys picked up their gear and never returned to play there anymore. Problem solved. Bribery effectively killed the motivation to play. The smell of dough took away the love of game. This is the premise. This is the theory of my topic today. We will try to dissect and analyze what made these lawyers decline a reduction in their fees but still agree to do their work for free. We'll also analyze what made these kids stop playing the game they loved when the money stream dried up. We'll also analyze how that motivation from the outside, also called the extrinsic motivation or external motivation, strangles the motivation from the inside, the intrinsic motivation or the internal motivation. Let's turn motivation from the inside out. But before that, although motivation as a trait has impact on every facet of a growing and productive life, whether at home or at work, whether for getting ahead in education or career, whether to raise a responsible child or to live a healthy and conscientious life. But for the purpose of today's conversation, we will focus on how to motivate people at work. We'll discuss the role of motivation in other areas of life in a different conversation of Keynote 180. Motivation can catapult a sluggish trawl towards one's goals into a sporty sprint without the drag of, do I have to do this? But before we get into real motivation or the motivation that rises from within our own gut, the internal motivation, let's get the bribes, the rewards, the incentives, the praise out of our way. In other words, let's get the external motivation out of our way. The research on motivation psychology suggests that this kind of motivation does work. I'm talking about the external motivation, but it works only for repetitive, low creativity, non-cognitive work that requires constant oversight. Little thinking required in this kind of motivation and this kind of work. The examples of such works are making sales calls, working at work line assemblies to produce a minimum number of products per hour, or being paid for services per client, like the doctors, the lawyers. These tasks are motivated by external financial or monetary rewards. Such triggers of external motivation do work, but only in specific circumstances, as I mentioned earlier. Gestures of external motivation, like a certificate or a gift card or even cash, can also serve as tokens of recognition to complement an already delivered product of internal motivation, but only after a goal has been accomplished and not at the outset. The internal motivation, on the other hand, has a very complex but rewarding and fulfilling mechanism of automatic recharge of its own. It's like nuclear energy. Doesn't need external fuel to generate its power. The intrinsic motivation process generates its own fuel. The fuel rods that generate the never-ending and perpetual energy in this process are made of the following 5 elements. Number 1 is purpose, also called relatedness or common goal or the company mission or the organizational objective. These are all different names for the same thing. The worksite application of this element could be hiring employees or talent from a pool of candidates whose passion in life is a skill that an organization is making the money from. An example of this could be an entertainment company which hires people who love to perform their art in front of people. Another example could be hiring and developing of people whose personal goal, for example, is to make money. Giving them the support and training to use their skills for making money for the organization, and in return sharing profits with them, can fulfill the purpose for both the organization and the person. Another example of syncing of personal and organizational objectives will be communicating a sense of security and a sense of belonging within an organization. The need for security and the need for belonging is the basic human as well as a corporate need. Syncing and communicating of these two needs will ensure the ultimate commonality of personal as well as organizational objectives. This is the first and the foremost of all 5 elements that fuel the internal combustion engine of motivation. Number 2 is autonomy. It's the freedom of being able to make small decisions for oneself at a workplace. It's a decision to choose a place for one's work desk. It's a decision to come in at a certain time of one's own choosing. It's a decision to plan and execute and assign tasks to one's own liking, as long as it doesn't hinder or obstruct other simultaneous tasks that are running alongside. It's also the freedom from micromanaging. It's a freedom from reporting every single step taken in the process, and the freedom from logging every single keystroke on the computer. Autonomy fosters responsibility and internal accountability to the outcomes of a process, as opposed to resignation to the subjection of a helicopter boss. Autonomy also leads to a sense of belonging to a workplace, exactly the way it does at home, where one is free to make small decisions for one's own life. Autonomy leads to creativity, which in turn builds self-esteem. Companies that are flourishing have started embedding autonomy within their workplace and work time. The universities that produce the largest number of Nobel laureates offer almost unbridled autonomy to their faculty to pursue creativity. Gmail, Google News, and Allo were all created by Google employees during their allotted free time. But autonomy is productive only when set upon a skill set that is correlated to the tasks that lead towards common purpose. That means you set your employees free only after they have been adequately trained on the tasks that they are expected to perform, not before that. The third element in pursuit of motivating employees intrinsically is mastery, also called competence. This is the fluency and command in performing assigned tasks. Lack of skill to adequately perform a task not only hinders a flow, it also affects self-esteem and confidence, which are the essential building blocks of intrinsic motivation. Mastery comes through guided practice and a judgment-free repetition of the tasks at hand. Effective training programs and mindful leaders make provisions to provide atmosphere of risk-free trial and error within an organization. Once a mastery of task is achieved, it automatically phases into a state of flow, which makes the task enjoyable and rewarding for intrinsic motivation. This is the third element for the continuous autonomous supply of the nuclear fuel for intrinsic motivation. This is the stage where seemingly life-threatening stunts at Cirque du Soleil actually provide a thrill to their performers. This is the state where stage fright means nothing to a manager. Mastery is what makes people start loving their work. Mastery of work also serves as a great stress reliever for the frustration that arise due to incomplete tasks or sloppy outcomes. Towards this end, effective leaders ensure that employees achieve a level of mastery through continuous support and training at whatever task they are assigned. The fourth element in pursuit of intrinsic motivation is challenge. To maintain a level of inner motivation, the tasks assigned or expected of an employee must be within what we call the Goldilocks zone of an employee's ability to perform. Easy or menial tasks unfit for the skill level of an employee are some of the biggest demotivators. Tasks that one considers too easy or too basic offer no sense of accomplishment, has no real satisfaction in doing them. These tasks should also not be challenging to a level far above one's existing skill set. That will also add to frustration of being incompetent. A task should be just a tad above one's existing skill set, which would compel an employee to learn and improve upon certain skills before successfully performing a task. New learning in this process adds to one's self-esteem, which once again sets in motion the wheel of intrinsic motivation. So, adequate challenge is the fourth element of autonomous intrinsic motivation. Case in point are the situations where a highly skilled employee is assigned a repetitive clerical task or a task that one can perform without engaging much of one's cognitive faculties or thinking abilities. A sense of detachment from such tasks takes away the sense of belonging, which in turn infests demotivation. All of these elements of demotivation have a domino effect. If one goes down, it takes everything else with it. On the contrary, the elements of motivation have a ripple effect or a tectonic effect. If one tectonic plate of motivation moves, it moves all the other plates of motivation with it. And so, a mountain of motivation is formed. And by the way, this is also how the geographic mountains have formed on this earth, with the movement and colliding of tectonic plates with one another. The fifth element in pursuit of intrinsic or internal motivation is feedback. This is the last of the 5 elements of the nuclear fuel rods of motivation, so to speak. A regular and specific feedback, critical or otherwise, is an essential element to staying on task. The best way to provide this sort of feedback is through the eyes and words of one's own peers in small groups of 2 to 4 people. A Gantt chart or a Trello project management system also helps in staying on task. A regular, frequent feedback is important to realignment and authenticity of a commitment to task. Feedback also provides an opportunity to share one's progress and expect a boost of recognition for further progress on the assigned task. As long as this feedback is objective to the task and not directed at the person. A positive recognition by one's peers and bosses, but only if it is authentic and specific in scope, serves as a great ignition for continuous subsequent progress towards one's goal. This sort of feedback system also has a built-in mechanism of checks and balances to caution from things getting out of control in an atmosphere of guarded autonomy. The process of fostering intrinsic motivation is not a straight line. It meanders through multiple twists and turns. Only the most accomplished managers in the art of motivation can harness the potential that skilled yet unmotivated employees can bring to an organization. They can turn their lazy, unmotivated employees into assets for their companies. The least an average manager could do is to take away the processes, the routines, and the directions that demotivate employees. That alone can turn the motivation level up. So, in summing things up, number one, you can't pay or reward someone into motivation, as we saw in the example where AARP asks the lawyers to lower their fee, or the old man tried to pay per game for the kids to play, and they start playing once the money dried up. Motivation must spring from within. Extrinsic rewards only work for menial, repetitive tasks, not for higher cognition demanding jobs. Likewise, inspirational quotes, quotations, or stories only work as triggers for motivation. They don't last long as intrinsic motivators. But before we can expect employees to work on their internal motivation, the basic survival of employees must be taken care of before they can start thinking of developing intrinsic motivation to achieve common organizational objectives. So just as a final reminder, just to cap up, the 5 elements of self-igniting intrinsic motivation are the purpose, where there's a commonality between the organizational purpose and personal purpose, the autonomy to perform, the autonomy to make small decisions at work, mastery of the task, mastery of the skills that are needed to perform a task, the nature of the job that has to be challenging enough, not a menial job that can be done without improving upon one's existing set of skills. And finally, an objective, productive feedback, which is directed at the task and not at the person. Thank you very much, and we'll get back to you once again with another episode of Keynote 180 on a different topic.